Welcome to the AIW Empower interview series. I'm really proud to have today with us as a guest, Alexandra Denniston. Thank you so much for joining me today, Alexandra. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So let's jump right into your job. Can you describe to us what you do today as your career?
Yes, I am a luxury wedding planner. I'm also a travel advisor, which is, we can talk about that, but that is part of how I've differentiated myself in my industry. And I help couples who are planning their weddings, whether it be their first wedding, second weddings, that does happen on occasion, or I also do vow renewals, other social events, corporate events. So anything really within the event realm. I help my clients from start to finish with all of the planning.
That sounds so exciting. You must meet a lot of really interesting people.
I do. I absolutely do. Yes. And everything keeps me on my toes on a day-to-day basis. That's for sure.
So speaking of your career, everyone's got a career path. Can you
Yes.
tell me a bit about your career path that had you studying to be a movie producer and then going into the event industry and then later venturing into what you have now as your own business?
Yes, absolutely. So, it's funny. The movie producer track, as I call it, was, I think, sort of an ignorant freshman in college, not knowing necessarily what to do with herself or her life. And, the concept sounded pretty cool. And as I kind of started to dive into some of the coursework and what that actually entailed, I was like, wait a minute, this is so not what I am into. This is not what I want. So I did a little soul searching as a freshman in college, and I said, if I'm going to change my major here and now, like, what's it going to be? What am I going to do? What are my strengths? What are my passions and the things that I love to do? And I truly did land in event planning overall. I wasn't really sure at that point where in the event planning industry, I might land, but I knew that, attention to detail was a skill of mine. I knew that I enjoyed bringing people together, and I knew that I enjoyed offering service to other people. So all of that kind of brought me to the event world. And I did complete my undergrad with a sport and event management degree. And during my college career, I actually did my very first internship in the industry as well. I worked with a well established wedding planner who really became my mentor and gave me the first look into what the wedding industry was, and what it really took to plan a wedding and execute a wedding and deal with clients. And I just fell in love with it at that point. That was kind of it for me. I was like, this is definitely what I want to do. And I think that was actually really special because it's not for everyone. A lot of people think of J Lo in the wedding planner when they think of planning a wedding. And while that can sometimes be a very small percentage of what you might do for a wedding planning, but it is definitely not the majority. So it's not for everyone. It's not for the faint of heart, but I, loved the thrill of it. I loved seeing everything come to fruition. I loved the attention to detail that came along with the planning process, and I really loved the interactions that I got to have with these couples who at that time were planning the most important events of their lives. So that's kind of how my passion specifically for wedding planning grew. um, and once I graduated from college, I worked actually in a lot of different areas within the event industry. So I worked for florists, I worked for designers, I worked for a catering company, I ran a couple of venues, and then I kind of transitioned into working in a five-star resort environment. And that's where I started to sort of delve a little more into the luxury wedding sector and luxury events. And again, really just fell in love with that and the concept of that. Again, definitely not for the faint of heart. It is a hard industry to break into and to exist in. But I really did fall in love with it. And after doing that for several years, probably about 4.5 years, I decided, and this was also after having my second child, I said, it's time for me to be deciding how many weekends a summer I'm going to be working and how much time I'm going to be home versus how much time I'm going to be working, which unfortunately was not a luxury that was afforded to me when someone else was my employer. And that's really what the kind of impetus for getting me into my own business was. And I've been about 3.5 years now into owning my own business and operating as my own boss. And I know for certain that I am where I'm supposed to be for sure.
That's amazing. And can you describe a little bit how it felt when you realized you were in the right place? How it felt to realize this is actually where I'm supposed to be. This is my passion. I'm going for it.
Sure. And do you mean within my own business or do you mean within like the wedding industry?
Within the industry, I would say, when you were describing before that, you were falling in love with it, you felt like
Yes.
these are things that made you feel excited. How did it feel to realize that you were pursuing the right career path?
Uh, it was really fulfilling at times and also really scary at times, I would say, because, like I said, it wasn't an easy industry to work within. I would say that the connections that I made and the relationships that I built with a really excellent network of vendors was helpful, and really helped me feel like I had a community behind me and like I was doing something. And obviously feedback from clients and things like that contribute to that very much as well. But I think the feeling most of the time was kind of disbelief a lot of the times because who thinks that they're gonna land exactly where they're supposed to, exactly when they're supposed to. And I wouldn't necessarily say that was my exact journey. I hit several kind of road bumps along the way where I was like, I thought that I had completely gone off track. And it actually turned out that going off track was exactly what I needed in order to continue to like grow and develop and ultimately get me to where I am today.
And we discussed beforehand, before this interview, we chatted, and you mentioned something, and I would love for you to talk about it. At one
Sure.
point, you felt like you might not be able to make it to where you are now.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I so that kind of goes perfectly with what I was just saying that, there were times where I was perhaps in a position employed in a position where I felt like I was at the top. Like this is the best that I can do in this industry. This is exactly like, what I should be doing. And kind of playing into, another one of the conversations we had previously, which was, what are some challenges that I encountered? I lost a job that I thought was it for me. I thought it was going to be the best job that I was going to have. I thought I was at the top of my industry. And as it turns out, even though obviously that was a really devastating experience for me, as it turns out, if I had not lost that job, there's no way, at least not in the time frame that I accomplished it, I never would have grown and developed as I had because another opportunity came up, which ended up catapulting me into this whole new kind of realm of opportunity. And not only opportunity as in to have a certain job, but also an opportunity to learn about a completely different sector of events that I had not previously been involved with. So even though it was really challenging and devastating to be in a position where like I lost a job, it was the best thing that could have had to me because I was in an environment where growth was not priority. I was in an environment where upper management did not, they wanted to keep you where you were. They didn't want you to kind of achieve the things that maybe you had in your head to achieve and didn't offer opportunities for you to grow and for you to kind of discover what your additional skill sets might be and things like that. So, it's so hard when you're in it to see the positive, but looking back on it, I know that it was 100% what should have happened. Absolutely.
That's incredible. I think that it happens to a lot of us, and it's hard to see
Right.
in the moment how it's going to turn out to be a positive move, but oftentimes it's the push or the obstacle that's needed to move
Right.
forward, but maybe in a different way.
Exactly. And I think, I put myself on this track and I'm like, this is the track that I'm supposed to be on. This is how you're supposed to progress through this industry in this, realm of position. Um, not, and I really just limited myself. I didn't open up my kind of like field of vision to see like all of the other potential paths that were out there. And that's something that I would definitely encourage anyone who is starting out their career journey to consider, that, very rarely are you on the only path you have available. You might have to get creative about it. You might have to open up your field of vision, but have some faith that there is definitely more than just one thing that you can do. Always.
So true. And you were mentioning previously that you were in a position that you lost, but in that company they wanted to keep people where they were at. So as you
Right.
moved and had different positions with different companies, have you found that mentorship in your industry is important?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, even just going back to the internship that I had when I was in college, the wedding planner who I worked with, I considered my mentor. And I'm still in touch with her today. And to be honest with you, I have a funny story about her specifically, because like I said, we still, now we're peers in the industry. So we're both running our own businesses, but I, learned from her and I really started out in the industry with her. And very recently, I had a client who had inquired with me, and I did not know who else they had inquired with in terms of, other people they might have been considering to work with. And this wasn't a full planning client. This is just a wedding day management client, which I typically only take on referrals. So another planner who wasn't available for their date had referred them to me, and we really hit it off. I really enjoyed speaking with them, during our discovery call. And I thought that, things were going really great. And after about a week's time, I had checked back in, and she responded to me and she said, "Thank you so much for talking with us. Like, we really enjoyed, interacting with you and talking to you. But ultimately, we decided to go with this planner, instead of with you." And it was my mentor. So I was like, of all people to lose business from, I guess, she would be the one I would want to lose business to, because
Right.
she's the one who gave me my beginning. And you know what? 2 days after that, I booked my largest event of the year.
Wow.
So I know that that was pretty much just the universe saying, like, they'll be in good hands. You need to focus on this project instead. So, and that's one of the things too that I really love about the event community is that, I really don't see other planners as competition. There is enough business out there for everyone. And I feel that a wedding planner specifically is such an intimate decision, because you really, like, it's like choosing a friend. Like, it really is, because a planner is with you during some of the most intimate moments, on your wedding day, but also during some of the most personal decision making that you might be making throughout the planning process as well. Um, a wedding planner is going to see into the inner workings of your family, as functional or dysfunctional as it may be. So I think that there is a planner for everyone, and I am not everyone's planner. I am not always going to be the right fit for every client that inquires with me. And I think that it was really important for me to learn that early in my career, because it helped me to create this mindset of community over competition. And that's why I have a number of friends who are also wedding planners in my general radius, servicing the same areas that I do. And I'm honored and proud to be able to recommend them when I think that they might be a better fit or when I'm not available. And they do the same for me. So, that's something that I have found to be important. And while that specifically isn't necessarily mentorship, I think mentorship also plays into the overall community that you're kind of working within in any given industry. So I do think that that is, immensely helpful. And I guess in a way, in my network of planner friends, like we do mentor each other. I had a very close friend of mine who's also a planner call me about a week ago with an issue she was having with her client. And she's like, I think I'm too close to this problem. I would love to just share it with you if you're comfortable and to get your perspective on it, because I feel like I might be making a rash decision or having a rash reaction when I might need to be thinking about this a little bit differently. And I was able to hear her side of the story. I was able to better understand her client side of the story. And contrary to popular belief, I did not just tell her she was right. I did say, like, you really do need to think about this from your client's perspective. And I gave her a few different ways to think about the situation. And ultimately, she felt more equipped to go into a more detailed conversation with her client about communication, about their, working relationship. And she called me yesterday to thank me for giving her a little extra perspective. So, that is a form of mentorships. While I may not be her dedicated mentor, like we do things like that for each other often. And I think it's so important that you lift others up within your general, industry community, and even outside of your industry as well. Women help women, please, everywhere. Just like shop at their businesses, lift them up, and give some grace as well, because I think everyone is striving for a similar goal in that we just want to make our way in this world and put our stamp, in our industry or in our community or general, geographical area, whatever it might be.
Agreed. And I really think it's incredible that you and your friend group do this for each other. It's really nice to have that support within the
Yes.
industry. Do you find that how you and your friends who are also planners,
Mhm.
is this typical of the industry culture, or is this more depending on where you're at or the people you surround yourself with?
So I think it varies. First off, I can say I do not think that it has always been like this. I think a lot of this community and this openness and this camaraderie has kind of come from the pandemic, to be truthful, because during that time frame, we all had to lean on each other so much, like in so many different capacities. There were a lot of people who didn't make it through. They didn't make it through. Their businesses did not survive the pandemic, unfortunately. I mean, the events specific to the events industry, the events industry was decimated during the pandemic. People couldn't gather. So that made it really, really challenging. When things started to come back, because the industry had been hit so hard, we really had to lean on each other in that comeback. We didn't have the teams that we had because we couldn't afford to employ them. We didn't have, some of the resources that were existing because they didn't exist anymore. So I think that because we all kind of had to come together during that time, that now, as we are coming past the worst of it, we came out being like, wow, like we were kind of like war heroes together in a lot of ways. We got through this really challenging experience together. And, you scratched my back, I scratched yours. And like, why can't it be like that all the time? And so I think that grew. Now, I can't speak for all planners, unfortunately. This has been my experience with my general area. I like to think that most people within the industry and amongst planners like um, feel pretty close to each other and want to help each other, because again, like I said, there truly is enough business for everyone. And I don't ever think that someone can say that someone else stole their business or anything like that. Like there's plenty of dates available, there's plenty of clients available. You may not be the right one for this person, but you will be for the next. So, while I don't know for certain that every, geographical area necessarily has this type of community, I'm proud to say that my area is one of those that does really feed into that. And I do think that in general, people are looking to help each other and are looking to, they're not doing the gatekeeping thing. Gatekeeping is very much over, I think. Whether that just be because the community has strengthened or because information is just so readily available now that it's like, what's the use in gatekeeping? Because I could Google it and probably figure it out if you don't answer me, kind of situation. So, so I do think that I like to think that my direct contact network is unique, but I also think very highly of the national global event industry. And I do think that people are really pulling together to make each other better in general.
Sometimes out of something terrible comes a little glimpse of positivity. So it's good that that
Exactly.
happened for the industry. So in terms of, you're talking about your friend group, the industry's changed a little bit. I'm very curious, I'm sure others are. Is there networking involved in your industry? Are there obligations off work hours in terms of connecting with um, event, what do you call them? To hold your
Vendors.
your vendors, thank you.
Yes, yes.
Obligations to meet with vendors off hours to schmooze a little bit, talk to caterers and whatnot? Is that something that's organized during hours? Is
Mhm.
everything expected to happen within work hours? Do you do stuff off work
Sure.
hours? Do you even network with other planners? Because there are different
Yeah.
kinds of planners. Do you sometimes work with other planners? It's
Hmm.
around your work hours. Um,
Sure.
how do
So
you provide
I
like
would
that
say,
perspective?
yeah. So in terms of networking, yes, networking is huge within this industry. Um, uh, the easiest way to kind of explain why, I guess, would be what I always tell my clients is I don't have a list of vendors that I just say, okay, here you go. Here are my recommended vendors. And the reason behind that is because I and this is me personally, so every planner has a different perspective on this, but I am making recommendations to you as my paying client based on a number of factors. It is definitely budget related. It is definitely style related. It may also be kind of design related. So if it's a photographer, like, are you preferring a more light and airy style or a moody dark style or a true color style? Those are all things that are going to play into who I might recommend to you as a photographer. But even more so than that is, what is their personality? Because and I'll just stick with the example of a photographer is going to be with you on your wedding day or on your event day from start to finish, like from when you're getting your hair and makeup done, getting dressed, telling you how to pose, getting all up in your grill when you're kissing your new spouse, like the whole 9 yards. If you don't like this person, it's going to be really uncomfortable. And that translates to your images too. I mean, as we're talking about photographers. So going back to networking, I don't have just a list. So I am constantly trying to grow my network because I always want to be able to give the best fit recommendation for my clients.
Mhm.
So I don't think I will ever be at a threshold where I'm like, okay, I know enough photographers now, or I know enough caterers now. Like I want to know them all because I want to be educated in who's operating in my radius. And I want to be able to make a really educated recommendation for my clients. That's what they pay me for, is to be able to give them that really kind of insider information. So yes, networking is extremely important. Um, we're also in the event industry. So we all love to party. Like, we love to gather. We love to have a good time. We love to interact and engage with each other. We love entertainment. We love food. So that is actually kind of the greatest formula for a networking event in general. And we have them often. There's a number of both national and local organizations. I'm a part of WIPA, which is the the Wedding Industry Professional Association. They have chapters all over the U.S. and worldwide. And they have a chapter in Boston, which is closest to me, and I'm a member of that chapter. And they hold quarterly meetings. So it starts with some networking, but it's networking in style because they have, you know, a showcase caterer that's doing some really great, you know, bites for people to try, so you can, you know, experience a new caterer. There's decor. They bring in, you know, really nice trending decor, so you can kind of get a feel for perhaps some new rentals that are available from a local provider. They generally will have some kind of entertainment, whether it be, you know, a jazz trio or a DJ or whatever it might be. And so they throw a little party, you know, for the first hour or so. And then usually after the main event, which is typically a speaker of some kind. So they'll bring in an expert within the field. The one that I went to most recently was the CEO of an online event and wedding vendor, kind of like Facebook for wedding vendors, I guess you could call it. And she came out and talked about SEO, which was so helpful. You know, and SEO is not something that is just for wedding vendors. You know what I mean? She was able to put that spin on it for our industry, which was fantastic. But they have some really excellent content that they then expose us to. So you get some networking, you get some education, and then, you know, they wrap up with, you know, some additional networking. And, you know, you leave and you feel like you had a little party. And I swear every time that I go, I meet someone new. You know, the last time I went to one of these, I met two new photographers and a stationer, and we now all follow each other on Instagram. We engage with each other's businesses on Instagram. We saw each other at the gala that they hosted a couple months ago. So, you know, it is really offering the opportunity to kind of create and kind of curate these wonderful connections with people. And I do think that that's really important. Not only, like I said, to be able to offer educated recommendations to my clients, but also because you never know when you're going to need something, you know, and that goes for me too. Like, you never know when someone might need a hand from me on organizing something or making a connection or whatever it might be. And, you know, it goes the other way that, like, oh my gosh, I'm in a pinch. This photographer that committed to this event has COVID and they don't have a backup, and who the heck is going to do this event, you know? So obviously those are extreme examples, but that's why a network that you can rely on is really so important, and definitely why I recommend anyone specifically in the wedding industry. I mean, obviously there's crossover in all industries, but specifically in the wedding industry, you know, having a really solid network that you can depend on is really important.
It's really important to have plans A, B, C, D. You never know.
Yes. Yep. Exactly. Exactly. For sure.
So going back to early in your career, can you discuss some of the mistakes that you made early on, looking back now?
Sure. So I think I can go back to one of the things that we talked about, which was kind of like pigeonholing myself in like one path, like one option. Because I remember having these conversations with my mom, to be honest with you, because my mom was you know, an HR professional of 35 plus years. So anytime I was doing something with my career, she would always be my sounding board. And she, looking back on it, she was trying to open my field of vision and like convince me that there were other options. And I was just so like one track minded at that point. And I was just like, no, this is it. This is the only thing that I can do. And this opportunity is going to slip me by. And then I'm going to have no options. And, you know, I think I wasted some time being in that mindset. Fortunately, you know, as we discussed, I was able to dig myself out of that, and recover and move on and grow. But I do think that, you know, I could have probably grown at an exponential rate had I wrapped my head around that a little bit sooner. Um, and yeah, so I think it's really important to just kind of keep your options open. You know, it might not look, I remember saying like, I can't do catering. I don't want to do catering because catering's not event planning. Wow. That was not true. That was not true at all. You know, the positions that I did, yes, I worked for a caterer, but I was the event producer. I was planning the events for the caterers, you know. And if anything, it gave me an even more like better rounded offering going forward, because now not only do I have those event planning skills, now I also know it from the food and beverage side. And I know how off premise caterers are thinking. I know what questions to ask a caterer when I'm hiring them for a client, because I was one. You know, I worked in that role. So it again, in that manner of taking something that maybe seemed like it wasn't a good fit and kind of twisting it to how it benefited me. You know, being stuck in those places really were in the end what helped me succeed, for sure. So that's why, you know, yes, I made mistakes, but at the same time, I'm glad I made the mistakes that I did, because they're what made me the person that I am today. They are what allowed me to, you know exactly what to say to clients in certain situations. They helped me become more well-rounded in my troubleshooting abilities, because obviously troubleshooting is such an important part of what I do. You know, that's one of the big things that clients hire a wedding planner for, is because they don't want to worry about issues on the day of their wedding. They want to just float along on that little cloud nine situation and just enjoy the
Absolutely.
day, as they should, 100%. So, you know, people like myself are there to catch the rain, so to speak, and to hold the umbrella, or, you know, to have already had a plan B in place, or um, to fix the back of the cake that got messed up, you know, because they had a cake topper that was too heavy. I mean, there are countless things that I've done to kind of on the fly fix issues that could have been momentous had there not been someone there to just fix them, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. What I'm trying to put this in context, I guess, with my
Yeah,
next
yeah.
question being, what is your success factor? I think you've described it, is that as you went along and you open up the
Hmm.
possibilities for your career a little bit more,
Yes.
and you worked for a caterer. We also talked about last time we met that you also worked at a venue at one point, which
Yes.
helped
Yep.
give you perspective into how things work, so that when you are in your position now, you know all the
Right.
ins and out. And so you built yourself a really solid foundation
Right.
that you can stand on now.
Exactly. And I think, you know, I would say my greatest success at this point is owning a business on my own, and running that business day to day on my own. But I never would have been able to do this, say, 10 years ago, because all of the like nuggets of knowledge that I gathered over the last 10 years are what are making me successful in my business today. So as much as, you know, the 10 years past me would have loved to be doing what I'm doing now, I'm not convinced that that would have been the best fit for me at that point. You know, I would have loved the idea of owning my own business. And I'm not saying that I would have failed had I done it sooner, but I'm definitely more equipped for success at this point in my business because of my past experience, for
Hmm.
sure.
And as you went along, what sacrifices have you had to make to succeed? And were those sacrifices worth it when you look at them now?
Sure. Yes, yes, I think they were worth it. I think it's really hard to see through the smoke at the time. I would say my biggest sacrifices were giving up my weekends and my holidays most years, most weekends, most holidays, because you know the industry that I'm working within is the industry of celebrations, and by definition, people celebrate when they're off of work, you know? So everyone else is operating on this like Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 schedule. and you're operating on this, no, whenever everyone else is off is when I'm working, pretty much. And then you're still also working when everyone else is working. So it's, it's a very untraditional schedule. And I had to miss a lot of family weddings. I missed a lot of, family gatherings with my friends, spending time with my friends, personal time, self-care. All of those things, were sacrifices that I had to make as I was making my way through, kind of like taking my lumps, so to speak. But at the same time, that sacrifice was also my big push to start my own business because well, I'm not escaping not working any weekends. Like that obviously was never the goal because that's just not realistic for this industry. But the fact that it laid within my choice as to which weekends I was going to make available for people to book and how I was going to work my planning schedule with my clients so that I could also still participate in family gatherings, spend time with my family and with my children, make time for my friends, make time for myself, like make sure that my mental health and my, just overall self was taken care of as well. So it was a sacrifice for a while. It was definitely worth it because again, I learned so much and opportunities would not have been offered to me if I had not been willing to work those hours. And it also, from a different perspective, helped me to understand and appreciate all of the other professions that don't have a choice, as to when they work. My husband is in law enforcement. So that's probably one of the reasons that we ended up working out so well is because we understood the fact that like if you have to work, you have to work. That's just how it is. I can't plan someone's wedding for a year and a half and then not show up. And he can't not show up if there's a natural disaster. He has to go into work if there's a hurricane. You know what I mean? So it's also helped me to kind of grow and foster that appreciation for other industries that don't have the choice, whether it be, law enforcement, public services, medical, all of those things where, people really just kind of have to bite the bullet and do it. Having been in that seat myself, obviously for very different reasons, not life or death, but, still it's helpful to kind of have that perspective, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to know their limits and the
Yes.
things that they're able to do and to know from the start what's required, the reasons why it's
Mm-hmm.
required, and how you can balance your life, and that it is possible to balance your life
Right.
in a different
Right.
way.
Exactly. Exactly.
So going forward, where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years?
Sure. I sure as heck hope that I have a team. I love owning my own business, but in the end, no one can do what I do by themselves. And I do have kind of like per diem assistants that work with me now on my wedding days as wedding day assistants. So I'm never doing an event by myself, which I don't recommend anyone plan a wedding and then try to execute it by themselves unless it's like 10 people. You need help, you need eyes in multiple places, you need multiple sets of hands. It's very important to have your people with you. But I would like to see my business grow as well. And I think that I've gotten to the point where I'm at my max capacity for the amount of business I can take on alone. So I know that the next step will be to grow my team. So I am working on a plan for how to make that work for my business because I know that hopefully after a while, after some onboarding and training and all of that, it will make my life easier. But those initial, months or years of time as someone is becoming familiar with my practice and my brand and my expectations, that there's probably going to be additional work required of me for a while. So, slowly but surely, I am going to be vetting and identifying those people who will help my business to continue to grow. So, definitely having a team under me, helping me, is a huge part of my long term goals. And then I would also really like to um, continue in the direction of like wedding business coaching, because there is something to be said, kind of going back to our conversation about mentorship earlier.
Mhm.
um, no one should be diving into their business completely on their own. You need someone who's done it, who's gone through the trial and error, to be a sounding board, to offer support, to offer another perspective, ideas, feedback, whatever it might be. And I worked with a business coach as well. I think it's really important. Obviously, I have my industry friends and contacts who have been immensely helpful, but I do think that having a dedicated business coach for you, whether you're in the wedding industry or in any industry where you're going to own a business, I do think that having someone who has done it before, to kind of walk you through it and to answer your questions, is really, really important. So, I love being able to help my industry friends. So, I see that as an opportunity to apply a passion, to make some money. You know what I mean? And so I do have a coaching program in the works currently that I'd love to launch in the next few years. I'm still working on the team, building the team first. That will be first and foremost, because hopefully by the time I have that up and running, I will have a bit more time available to then kind of dive full force into some coaching opportunities.
Well, that sounds really exciting. Uh,
Yeah.
when you do have it up and running, we'd love to feature it on the website so that people can take advantage and get
Yes,
some,
I'd love that.
yeah, get some coaching.
For sure. Yes, it's I really, it was not a path that I considered. It's one of those things, like, that was not something that I thought I would do or that I would try to pursue. But I think as the kind of pieces have fallen into place, it's just kind of presented itself as a natural next step. I think, just based on how my business is developing. So yeah, I'm very excited to be able to launch that. Hopefully, let's say end of 2024 into 2025. I'm not going to get too ahead of myself, but
Yeah, no, that sounds good. Everything one step at a time.
right, right, exactly, exactly.
And now looking past the 5 to 10 years, if you could have what you wanted, what are your long-term goals?
So, I mean, ultimately, I would really love quality over quantity in terms of the events that I'm doing. Not to say that any of my events are not quality events. They're all quality events, but I more mean, I guess, like hard hitting in terms of budget. So, you know, the higher the budget event, the fewer of them I have to do. So, if I can target 2 or 3 really big ticket events per year, the workload is still there, of course, but the volume is diminished, and it allows me to reclaim back some of the life that I quote unquote lost during the time of sacrifice, I guess you could say, and earlier in my career. And I have young children, so family is very important to me. Family is part of the reason, again, that I wanted control over my schedule. And they are my priorities. So I would say my long-term goal is just being the best possible mom that I can be, for as long as my kids will let me act as mom. And even beyond that, when I have to force it upon them.
Could be any age. It comes
Right,
and
right.
goes, right?
Exactly, exactly. So, and I see growth for my business. I think eventually, like, I don't want to be up until 1 a.m. planning weddings until I'm 55. Like, I think there will come a time where let's pass that on to the spring chickens and let me stay home while they execute, and I can focus, say, on coaching. I think that's sort of the long-term trajectory of, my career and how I'd like to see my business progress.
Hmm. And clearly, this is a very social job, a very social industry. How
Oh,
do you
yes.
motivate yourself when there are days where you don't feel it, you're just not in the mood? How do you get yourself to still get going, put on the face, and go be?
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's really hard. It's really hard. I would say I meditate. I highly recommend meditation. Um, Anytime that anything feels overwhelming for me, I like to take a step back and quietly kind of sit and regroup. Um, I think that it's really important to quiet your mind. And I think the fact that I'm able to do that is what helps me to kind of recharge and get to a place where it's more realistic that I can, tackle tackle the social realm of things if I'm not feeling it. I'm not saying that's a fix all. It doesn't always work. It helps for sure. But I mean, there are definitely times where you just have to like grin and bear it, like put on a face of makeup and put on some cute outfits or nice shoes or whatever it is and just kind of like go with it. I have a great pump up playlist. Like that's
Oh
really
yeah.
all you can do. I think because sometimes you can't just flip the switch and make yourself want to do it. Sometimes you just got to force yourself into it. But I also find that I do thrive off of, engagement with others. So most of the time, even if I didn't feel like going initially, once I'm there and, I hook up with, a friend of mine who's there or I meet someone new, like that kind of like lights the fire in me and like makes me happier to be there, I guess you could say.
Oh, I love that. You get motivation from other people sometimes.
Right. Yes, for sure. For sure.
So let's diving a little bit to your day to day. What's a
Sure.
typical day or week for you? And I know this probably isn't really something you can answer, but
Yeah, yes.
how typical or atypical is it? But what do you usually have to tackle?
Sure. So will be perfectly upfront. I'm a mom first. So, and my kids right now are 3 and almost 2. So, they are not of an age where they're really entertaining themselves at all. So, really during their waking hours, I am with them. I'm not taking phone calls, or at least I'm trying not to. And I'm not on email. So my work time is extremely segmented. Um, I would say, like, aside from the times where I am like specifically planning for an appointment or a meeting outside of my home, or anything like that, when I like get a sitter to watch them, I'm operating within nap time. Which is usually like 1 to 4 if I'm really lucky. And then after they go to bed, so 7:30 until 10:30, 11. Which has taught me to really be as efficient as possible, for sure. Efficiency is incredibly important. Um, and as my kids get older and a little more independent, um, it has also helped me to decide that I would really like to put some additional boundaries in place because uh, this the way that I am working currently, I know is not long term sustainable. It's what I have to do now to make sure that things get done. But once my kids do go to school, I am going to be implementing a rule that once the kids are home from school, I won't be doing any more work because I want to be able to spend that time with them. But of course, them being at school will allow me to get a lot more done during my day to day. So in the time that I am working, generally I am communicating with clients. I am following up on, planning tasks. I work within a kind of client management system that allows me to set individual checklists for each client project. So I check in on that on a daily basis. I also have a consulting client currently that I'm working with. So I consult with a venue and I basically support them on the start of their sales funnel. So I dedicate a certain number of hours per day to that, specifically that project, so that I can stay kind of consistent with the amount of hours and effort that are going into that. And of course, phone calls tend to consume a lot of my days, although I have started to filter those to specific days of the week. So generally, Tuesdays and Thursdays are my phone call days. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, I try to keep them as clear of phone calls as possible so that I can focus on actual task management. And as far as after hours work, I do open up a couple of time slots for phone calls after hours on Tuesdays and Thursdays specifically, because I understand that not all of my clients can wedding plan at 1 p.m. You know what I mean? So, it's really important to me to, understand the needs of my clients. And, I do know other planners that set their daytime office hours and don't really flex outside of that. And whatever works for each individual, I think is fine for them. For me, I like to have a little bit of flexibility where I can set a precedent to say, I understand that wedding planning isn't your full-time job, and I want to be respectful, of your time as well. Which is why I like to open up some evening hours for, phone calls and meetings as well, just to be able to make it as convenient as possible for them. Because in the end, I know that planning can be stressful. And, one of the things that I advertise about my services is that they're going to help you stay calm. So I don't ever want planning a meeting with me to make a client feel like they're stressed out or not calm.
Well, it sounds like you're very organized, and I'm sure that was one of the perks that you wanted when you opened your own business, was to be able to
Right.
choose your hours specifically while your kids are young.
Right.
But I'm
Right.
sure that's benefited your clients as well, where they know you have your priorities and you're very clear with what you offer and
Right.
when.
Absolutely. And actually, that's part of my onboarding process with my clients is discussing my communication style, discussing my hours, discussing how they can get my time. I use Calendly. It's a really great resource. If you're not familiar with it, definitely recommend checking it out. It hooks up to my calendar and I can set my availability for different types of meetings, whether it be a discovery phone call, a meeting, a vendor phone call, a Zoom, whatever it might be. And people they don't even need to talk to me. I can just send them their link. They can look, they can compare it with their availability, and they can choose a time and it just pops up on my calendar. And that has been immensely helpful in, maintaining those communication boundaries as well as the timing. And actually recently I've started using Slack with my clients. And if you're not familiar with Slack, it's similar to text messaging, but it's all kept within an app. You can send images, you can do video and phone calls within it as well. And depending on what level of the service that you have, it can save your conversations anywhere from 90 days to forever. So it's searchable, which I have found to be really helpful. So if I have a conversation with my client about a type of flower that they want to use in their floral arrangements, and I don't remember what it was, I can go back and search flower. And anytime that we talked about flowers, those conversations will pop up. So it's a really great tool, not only to allow my clients to feel like they have pretty easy access to me because it is like text messaging, but it also is a tool for me to keep track of everything that's been discussed. Whereas, doing that via text is not always best. So it's become a really helpful way, again, for me to maintain my boundaries, but still ensure that my clients feel like they have, pretty open access to me.
Mm-hmm. I know I have a very, very important question that I'm sure everyone's dying to know. I'm dying to know. What is the most fun event you've ever planned without naming any identifiers, of course.
Sure. Oh my gosh. So there's probably I have a top two. One that was just like crazy unique and one that was just really fun. And they're two different types of events. So the one that was just crazy unique was a wedding. Um, it was in 2020. So it was a COVID wedding. Um, they had about 80 people. And I called it the circus wedding, not in like a negative way, but because there were limitations to like they couldn't have a dance floor. It wasn't allowed because people couldn't be close to each other. Like people needed to be masked. So dancing was out of the question, which if you think about it, like when you go to a wedding, like that's kind of the main event is like you have your dinner and then you go dance. So we had to get really creative on how we entertain these guests. Like we had to do something to like make it fun. Otherwise it's just a big dinner. So they had so many awesome entertainment factors throughout the entire event. We hired living statues. So they were like these really cool marble statues, but they were live people and they were set up on like the walkway that their guests walked down to access their cocktail hour. And they would like kind of like slowly move into like different positions and things like that. Very unique, very not something that you see every day, obviously at a wedding. The same company who did that also did these really unique like puppets. Puppet, and it's not like Elmo, like not that kind of puppet. They had these really cool butterflies that actually like flapped their wings. And we were in like an ocean garden setting, so it was very like appropriate based on the setting. So they had those kind of walking around and just like interacting with their guests. They had a roving caricature artist who was going around like drawing all of their guests. They had someone who was doing sleight of hand, like magic tricks with their guests, kind of walking around during cocktail hour. During the dinner, although guests couldn't dance, they had two different dance performances, which were permitted. So they had like a really cool 1920s like flapper dance, and then they had a more like modern like hip hop style dance at different parts during their dinner. They had a really great food truck for late night snacks at the end of the night, which was also complemented by a fireworks show, which was really fun. And then they had some of those puppets at nighttime were glow in the dark. So they had like these really cool, like glow in the dark jellyfish and like other very like random but cool kind of like glowing puppets outside during the fireworks, which was really cool. And then they ended with an Elton John impersonator who did like, so this sounds very disjointed. It all worked out really well. The guests never were bored. There was never a moment where someone was like, oh, this is kind of boring for, you know, a COVID wedding. And it obviously like reflected the couple and their preferences and was really fun. Really fun for everyone involved. A lot of logistics, obviously, that went into that, but I would say that's definitely one of the most fun, quirky, different weddings that I've, you know, had the honor of being a part of. And the other event that was just really cool was a fundraiser event. I was not the main planner. I was helping and I did contribute to some of the design. But it was like 1950s bowling theme. And we built a bowling alley, like basically. And it was so cool. We all of the tables were like 60, 70 foot long, like rectangles, like end to end. And we covered them with this like light wood vinyl so that it looked like a bowling alley. And then at the end, we had like suspended these like giant bowling pins and bowling balls, like so it looked like they were getting hit by the bowling balls. It was so cool. We built like a giant jukebox and we had guys on motorcycles and girls in like the sock hop dresses. And it was really cool as far as themed events go. That one was really fantastic.
That all sounds so amazing. I feel like, especially with the wedding one as well, like now
Yes.
just the dancing sounds a bit boring.
Right, exactly. So, and I think that, COVID really forced people to get creative. Like, if you're still going to have an event, that's great, but you have to work a little bit harder to make it cool. Um, so I think that that has carried through, even though some of the restrictions and whatnot that were related to COVID are no longer in place. People are still trying to kind of one up the entertainment piece and still are looking for like fun ways to impress and engage their guests throughout events, which has been a fun challenge for people like me as planners to
Mhm.
figure out like what is going to be that next like wow factor that someone's going to incorporate into their wedding to really impress their guests.
Yeah, it's like a fun competition.
Right, exactly.
And given all the stuff that you've learned and all the fun things you've gotten to plan and be a part of, if your job were suddenly eliminated tomorrow, what would you feel prepared to do? And I'm sure there's a list, but what
Yes.
would top your list?
So I think the great thing specifically about weddings and planning specifically is that there's a lot of transferable skills, unfortunately for me. So, the fact that I have project management skills, that I have design background, all kind of allows me to go in whatever direction I want, whether I want to go into more of like a marketing project management type of role. I think though, I really like working with people. So if I could not plan weddings, I would like to coach entrepreneurs for sure, because I think that and I don't think that it would have to be within the wedding industry. So if we framed this question as if the wedding industry was suddenly eliminated, I would say I would still really want to work with entrepreneurs because I think that I have had enough experience in a lot of different areas and background, obviously, with owning my own business, that I could really help anyone who's looking to start their business. Maybe I'm not an accounting, expert by any means. But I think that I can definitely offer some perspectives and experience that would help people who are just starting out, even if it's something as simple as like figuring out how to do their business plan. I have done business plans for others before. I've worked with them to kind of help them hash out like how they're going to lay out their business and whatnot. So I actually think that would be kind of my top preference. If the wedding industry didn't exist anymore, I would definitely move into more of a business coaching and support role for sure.
Well, it sounds like you have a lot to choose from.
Yes, yeah, that's for
Definitely.
sure. That's for
Yes.
sure.
And you have the network too to make it happen, which is
Yes,
fantastic.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So, in your experience, when other people leave the industry, what are the usual reasons?
Oh, burnout is definitely one. Burnout is really tough because, like I said, there's enough business to go around. And business does go around, and it gets to a point where sometimes, like, there's so many opportunities that are put in front of you that if you don't know how to say no, or if you choose not to say no, um, you can get burned out really, really quick. When I was starting my business, I set a max capacity for myself. I thought about it. I thought about the typical amount of time that goes into each like event project that I work on. And I set a limit for myself because the last thing that I want to do is let the thing that I love doing stop me, from continuing to do it. And I have seen many people, not just in the wedding planning sector, but just in events in general, like especially people who, for instance, if I had stayed working at, the five-star resort, like, yes, I would have done some really amazing events, but I would have lost it because I would have had no time for myself. I would never have had time for my family, self-care, and I would have just said, like, I'm done, I'm out of here. So I'd say that's probably the top reason why people leave this industry. Um, you know, I, and it's funny, there's not like any one area where people go to when they leave. Like, I've seen people do all sorts of really interesting and random things. So, that just, I guess, goes to show you that if you're working in this industry, you are definitely equipped to do a lot of different things, and you're not stuck in this industry. I've seen people go into, marketing, business, finance. I've seen people go into more design work, interior design work. I've seen people become authors, coaches, like pretty much the spectrum of possible things. So, when they leave, it's not like they're going to go do one specific thing. I would say it kind of ends up across the board for sure.
It makes sense because you have so many options, and I guess the
Right.
world is your oyster depending on your preference, what's available,
Yes,
etc.
for sure. For sure.
And again, keeping within your experience, you've met a lot of
Mhm.
people, you've worked with a lot of people, excuse me. What personal attributes do you feel that you've seen it reflected in those people that have been really key to their success?
So definitely caring about other people is a big one. And feeling very tied to service to others. I think that's a huge part. Everyone has their skill, like their physical skill set for whatever they're doing within the industry. But I would say, caring about others and caring about the outcome that their work will bring. Is a huge attribute that you'll find amongst anyone in this industry. Um, Obviously, attention to detail, very type A personalities most of the time, and then sometimes you'll get those folks that are just very, very artistic and have zero attention to detail, and they really just focus on the beauty of it, the pretty stuff, the design, and they're amazing at it. And then they just hire the people that are type A to help them keep things in line. So I would say there's a pretty wide spectrum, but service to others, attention to detail, and some kind of artistic creative vibe also I would say is most common.
Wonderful. A lot of different attributes that I think people could fit in. And so there's really a
Yes,
little bit of something for everyone. I want to thank you so
definitely.
much, Ali, for joining us today. There's a lot
Thank
of great
you.
pieces of information in here for everyone,
Yes.
and things to take into consideration if you're looking for what to do in your career or what to try next. Uh, Even all the things that Ali mentioned in terms of how she built her foundations, really great areas to start into. Before we
For
go,
sure.
Ali, I'm going
Yes.
to give you the floor. Just if you have any pieces of advice for anyone who might be interested in pursuing a career in this industry or who's already starting on their career path
Yeah,
in this industry.
absolutely. So I would definitely recommend, if you haven't started yet, or even if you have, definitely some kind of internship, or even a part-time stint somewhere to get your feet wet and to really understand what it takes to be in this industry. Because like I said, it's not all J Lo and headphones and that whole thing. That is definitely a skewed view, I think, of this industry at times. So I think getting some firsthand experience, is imperative, just to make sure it's the right fit for you. I'm not saying it's not the right fit. I'm just saying you want to be 100% sure before you dive in head first that it's what you want to do. If you have already done that homework and you know that this is the place for you, then I would say hit the pavement, attend networking events, network with people, reach out. And I don't mean you have to just go to networking events. I say do your research in your area that you're operating and identify other vendors or contacts that you want to be involved with, that you aspire to be like, that you want to work with, and make those connections. Very rarely have I genuinely reached out to someone in an effort to connect with them and received a negative response. Most of the time, people are excited to connect with you, to share more about their business, to learn more about you and what you're doing. So I would say probably 85% of my business comes from my network, not even from people who just Googled me or who, were searching. It's coming from that network of people. So I really do think that that's the most important piece of your foundation. And I would encourage anyone who is diving into this industry to focus on that first. Build that network, because opportunities will be afforded to you if you are in front of the right people and if you're connected to the right people, for sure.
Thank you so much, Allie.
Thank you. It was so great to be here, Lynn.